Honda wants to be fully electric by 2040. Anything's possible, but my gut's telling me that Honda's not going to be able to do that. At the end of last month, Toyota saying, hey, this 3-row EV we're planning to make in Indiana, well, let's maybe send it to Kentucky and delay it by a couple years. You have Hyundai continuing to suspend EV production at their EV plant in South Korea over and over. And then this was a shiv right into the back of EV development in the United States when Trump signed the bill that kills the EV tax credit starting September 30th. And then straight out of Japan, we get Honda scrapping EV SUV development due to decreased U.S. demand. Guys, if you enjoy automotive news, I cover it just about every single day on the channel. I still have some car reviews I need to do this week, between it an electric vehicle, ironically, the EV6, as well as the refreshed Volkswagen Taos. Stay tuned for those reviews. And I will be doing a Honda event. I'll be flying to California this week to drive some really historic Hondas that you won't want to miss on the channel. So make sure you're subscribed. And if you enjoy this content, I would always appreciate a like button. Hit a Ruzel. Japanese automaker to redirect investments to profitable hybrids. Go figure. Is this the SUV that Honda's actually halting? And the answer is no, because this vehicle's still slated to come out of the Marysville auto plant at their BEV factory. This is the first one to come out with the saloon, the kind of like the Lamborghini looking thing. That will be coming out, I think, at the end of 2026. But this is the first one to come out. And I think the styling's amazing on it. Think of it as an electric CRV. It looks a lot better than a CRV. I just drove the new CRV. I actually posted a review or first driving impressions on the Sport Touring model last night. So go and check that out if you want to learn more about the refreshed CRV. But we're talking about the development of a large electric SUV. Let me show you. Here we are with Honda's plans. Now, we haven't seen anything about this entry-level SUV yet. That's supposed to be coming next year. We now have the design for this midsize SUV. I don't know why it's not filled in this graph. Maybe it wasn't revealed at the time. Probably not when they made this graph, because the saloon has modified its look. So this was the original concept. There's a new prototype. This 3-row SUV slated for 2027 has essentially been scrapped completely, not delayed, scrapped. Now, what does that mean? I would say all of these after this are in question as well. And maybe this one too, since we haven't heard a drip of this entry-level 0 Series SUV. But more than likely, since it is 2026, it might not be canceled. Time will tell though. But this is gone. I don't know why you would need a third electric SUV. All right, this one's gone. So this would have been the fourth, then they would have had a fifth. It's just really, really confusing. This lineup, it made no sense. Now, I guess this is globally, but you got to keep in mind the 0 Series are not slated for China whatsoever. The 0 Series is for Europe, Japan, and the United States and Canada, so North America. All right, so maybe some of these were really tailored for like the European market or something, and then like essentially a Civic EV by the end of this decade or the start of the next decade. Who knows what this lineup's now going to look like? These two for sure are coming in 2026. Everything else is a big question mark. And we'll come back to this article, but the demand for 3-row EVs is like a joke right now. All right, for example, let's look at the EX90. Who's going to put $100,000, well, starting at 80, who's going to put $80,000 to $100,000 on an unproven EV 3-row? All right, especially, people are a little sensitive to Chinese investments right now. I know a lot of people are, and they wouldn't want to buy a Volvo EX90 that's essentially tied directly to a Chinese company. I'm not going to say whether that's right or wrong. People should have their own beliefs. And the Volvo EX90, I'm not sold on it. I haven't driven it yet, but I will be driving the XC90 refresh next week, so stay tuned for that. I'm typically a huge sucker for Volvo vehicles, Chinese relations or not. All right, what else? Well, you have the new Ioniq 9, which I almost guarantee is a better vehicle than that EX90 that we just looked at, but a lot cheaper. I haven't driven this yet either, but I really want to. The Ioniq 9, it's actually priced pretty respectively for a 3-row. EV SUV. Big discounts can be had on it, 4 or 5 grand. But yeah, you can actually lease an Ioniq 9 for less than a Highlander, and a Highlander retails for like $11,000 less, a Highlander hybrid versus an Ioniq 9. So, but that's going to change, right? Because the EV tax credit is going away by September 30th. So if you want an EV in the United States, now is the time. Now until September 30th. After that, it's going to be, I mean, the cost of leasing these things is going to go up more than likely. All right. And then people like the manufacturers are just going to keep pulling out investments into EVs. All right. So we already talked about those two. The EV9 that I reviewed last year, one of the best EVs I've ever driven. I think it's fantastic. Also, huge price cuts. So we see these massive price cuts. Rivian also, I think it's right here. Yeah. Just got a 20% price cut on their leases because they can't sell these things. All right. They cost a boatload. So no one's buying them with cash. Everybody's leasing them until the EV tax credit is gone. And even then, they depreciate so fast. But what else? What else? We have this Vistic. I haven't driven this either, but it starts at around $80,000. Price cuts of $8,000 are already happening. I believe this is a pretty new 3-row EV as well. The market for three-row EVs is terrible. And you got to remember, Cadillac Escalade IQ also exists, but that costs more like 150 grand, which is also laughable. If we look at something like a very powerful hybrid TX, these are around $70,000. And I think a lot of people would rather have that than a $70,000 EV Cadillac Lyriq. But let me know in the comments below. You can get an Acura MDX with a V6 for under $60,000. I think that's the sweet spot. Otherwise, just get the Type S, right? $77,000 for a Type S. I would pick over all these other vehicles, all these 3-row EVs that we've discussed today. So back to this article. They also mentioned Ford has withdrawn from large EV development. Honda will proceed with introducing its flagship sedan and midsize SUV models, which prototypes have already been unveiled, like I mentioned earlier. The decision to cancel development of a large SUV was influenced by a slowdown in demand. I'm also going to say, like, this came out the day after essentially the tax credit was killed. You have a lack of incentives, and if you can't lease those 3-row EVs for cheap, or should I say compared to a gasoline 3-row crossover, they have no shot. And I commend Honda here. You know, they're seeing the demand for EVs really slow down in the United States. And then you take away the tax credit, which is a primary motivator of electric vehicles. With that being completely gone and taken out of the lease situation, Honda's doing the smart thing here. Absolutely. They're saying development and procurement costs for large models involving batteries and chassis are significantly higher. Concerns about potential sales volume constraints could exert financial pressure on company operations. We're seeing all these companies that have 3-row EVs lose money on them. They're all discounting them to the moon. They all have a lot of cash on the hood, and that is including the EV tax credit, which was going to be abolished by September 30th. Once that is gone, it's going to be really difficult to sell a 3-row EV. 3-row EVs probably are like the least desirable form function of EVs in the United States anyways. You have 2-row crossovers, you have sedan EVs. Even the sedan EVs aren't doing that well if you look at like an Ioniq 6, for example. But the crossover EVs, the 2-row EVs are doing the best, right? The Model Y, for example, still sells a ton. But the Model Y, for example, also just lost its global sales crown to the RAV4 last year. And the RAV4 is going fully hybrid by the end of this year with the new redesign. So Honda is drastically reducing EV-related investments through 2030. Keep in mind, Honda says, hey, we're going to be fully electric or fuel cell, which, by the way, also this week it came out that Honda's pulling back their investments into fuel cell. Not entirely, but they're really taking a couple steps back on fuel cell development. So they're also pulling back on battery electrics right now from 69 billion, which is 10 trillion yen, to 7 trillion yen. All right, so a reduction in what is that? 30%. Scrapping the large SUV development project as part of that adjustment. So Honda could be saving like $1 billion here by scrapping this 3-row EV development, in which by the time it came out in 2027, there's going to be little market for these electric 3-row crossovers. that already, you know, are taking a lot of money away from the company because they have to be incentivized. So they start talking more about their hybrid plan. So we're going to go ahead on over to Honda's official announcement here. This is Honda's decision now. Okay, they're scrapping this 3-row EV in 2027. And guess what they have? The main battleground for Honda hybrid models is North America. There continues to be a solid demand for large-sized vehicles with spacious interiors and high cargo capacity. And in order to fulfill such demand in a sustainable manner, Honda will develop a hybrid system for large-sized vehicles. So this announcement came out May 20th. All right. When this announcement came out, I celebrated. I was like in the streets partying, not quite, but like I'm like, finally, Honda is listening to the consumers, listening to the market, and they're going to be developing finally hybrids for the Pilot, the Passport, the Ridgeline, if that vehicle even sticks around for a new generation. Acura will finally be getting these hybrids, more than likely. I don't see them going fully electric now anytime soon, that is. I'm also the Odyssey, my favorite Honda, probably for families. No, there's no doubt. My favorite Honda or Acura for families is the Odyssey, hands down. Once that gets a hybrid, oh my gosh, I will be partying in the streets when that happens. Anyways, this will feature powerful driving performance. All right, if we look at Hyundai's new hybrid coming out on the Palisade. All right, thank you, AI overview. It's a 2.5-liter turbo paired with 2 electric motors, combining a combined output of 329 horsepower and 339 pound-feet of torque. They're aiming for over 30 miles per gallon on the highway. Hyundai's new hybrid system is going to be bonkers for their large platform. It's already, I think, available in Korea on the Palisade or by the end of this year. Now, I will be driving the Palisade this month. It will not be the hybrid. It will be, I think, the V6 model. Thank God that they kept the V6 in the Palisade. Oh my gosh, it's such a smart move by Hyundai. Maybe they knew like that these companies are no longer going to be punished for not meeting emissions regulations or fuel economy regulations. That was just scrapped in the new build too. Honda, if they can come out with something competitive like this, hear me out. Would you guys be more interested if Honda kept their new V6, 3.5-liter V6 hybrid instead of a 2-liter turbo hybrid? With emissions the way they are right now, I would say go V6 hybrid. Honda, your V6s are great. Give us a V6 hybrid. I think that would be awesome. No one else is doing it. I guess the TX 550h Plus does it, but that's essentially completely unavailable. There are like none in my area whatsoever. All right. But if they can come out with a V6 hybrid instead of a 2-liter turbo hybrid, I know Honda's 2-liter turbos is great, but I think that would help. Like they just redesigned their 3.5-liter V6. Double overhead cam versus a single overhead cam. I would love to have a V6 hybrid from Honda. Probably wouldn't get the fuel economy of what this Hyundai would, but people love their V6s. All right. And I think they would have a lot of success there. But we'll see. We'll see what Honda, because Honda doesn't say, other than featuring powerful driving performance, high towing capability, they don't say what kind of engine. They don't give us any details on this new hybrid for large platforms. They want to apply this hybrid system on products launched in the latter half of the 2020s. Well, that 3-row EV is gone. And so that essentially allows them to focus on this hybrid system and applying this hybrid system to as many large platform vehicles as possible. And here's the thing with hybrids right now. Hybrids command a higher price compared to gasoline models, and people are willing to pay it. Whereas in an EV 3-row right now, they command a much higher price tag and people aren't willing to pay it. Look, Rivian's having to discount their leases 20%, and that includes the EV tax credit. Once that's gone, it's going to be really, really ugly, like I mentioned a million times in this video. So Honda is going to continue to launch 13 next generation HEV models. That includes, by the way, the big platform hybrids, but we'll start seeing it on the new Prelude by the end of this year. All right, this is going to be a new 2-liter hybrid in North America. They're also working on a new 1.5-liter hybrid for Japan and smaller markets, or should I say markets that don't demand as much horsepower. All right, so this is going to start over 4 years, starting in 2027. So launch 13 hybrids starting in 2027 to build a broad lineup of hybrid models and capture growing HEV demand in the market. Also, keep in mind, Honda wanted to build an EV supply chain in Canada. Now you have the tariff situation, which is just going to make it very difficult for Honda to move forward with building an EV plant and EV supply chain in Canada. I mean, could you imagine if tariffs didn't happen? Yeah, there are pros and cons of tariffs, but I'm saying for Honda in this situation, the tariffs may have been like extraordinarily beneficial for them. Could you imagine they built, and they still might do it, but they build this entire supply chain for EVs in Canada, okay? And let's imagine there's no import tax or whatever on vehicles, all right? The 25% is now 2%, actually 0% on North American vehicles, right? Because of the North America Free Trade Agreement or whatever it is. It's not NAFTA, it's a USMCA agreement. Anyways, no import tariffs. So Honda could build a bunch of EVs up in Canada and then send them to the United States. But even if there was no tariffs on them, imagine a market that is not ready to consume that many EVs. All right. So Honda would have wasted tens of billions of dollars building this supply chain in Canada, which they still might. It's been put on pause for now. And then maybe they didn't even plan for shifting production from EVs to potential hybrids at that plant in Canada. It sounds like it was EV only for its most streamlined and most effective EV production as possible, just like Tesla. So essentially, Honda was doing their own Tesla plant, only building EVs in Canada. But now, tariffs, plus a lack of an EV tax credit, plus a cooling demand on EVs, they would have burned a massive hole in their pocket by making an EV hub in Canada. And they, like I said, they still might do it. Honda hasn't altered their plans to be fully electric by 2040, but maybe they'll push it back a decade. I don't know. But the way things are right now, Honda's best at just building the small amount of EVs that they need to out of the Marysville auto plant year by year, monitor EV demand. Produce to the demand, not produce due to expectations. I know that's like, you might say, Kirk, everyone's going to pass Honda. No. Honda, here's the thing, you can't waste too much money on EVs right now for the North American market. There's enough buyers for probably 10 to 15% on average, California being a little bit higher for EVs in the United States. But now that the EV tax credit is gone, where does that lay? Like, where is the EV penetration going to be? Okay, is it going to be less than 10%? It wouldn't make sense for Honda to build this plant up in Canada for an EV supply chain and EV manufacturing hub. All right, keep it simple, keep it streamlined. Just build them out of Marysville, Ohio to reduce costs and not to stick your neck out into a market that is not ready for that sort of EV adoption. All right. As we go back to, the roadmap here with Honda, what they were planning for. This is smart of Honda. So think of it like this. Okay, they're killing essentially all these models. Think of it like this. This one's for sure killed. The rest of them likely killed. All right. And then they'll just have 3 electric vehicles, which is all you need in today's market. Okay. Maybe even more than what you need in today's market. And then they can really focus all this R&D that they were planning for EVs, focus it almost entirely on hybrids. Now you might be saying, Kirk, some of this has to go to Europe. That is true. Honda can also do this. Honda can export I think that's what it's called, their EVs from China to Europe. That's what they could do. But again, with political situations, there might be a time where that's not feasible for Honda to make EVs in China and ship them to Europe. All right. I think over time that's going to kill the European manufacturing force for any vehicle. All right. If they just allow all these Chinese EVs to come in. All right. That's the only thing that's kind of saving the United States manufacturing is essentially it's such a high tariff on Chinese cars, so that they can't be sold here profitably. This is good for Honda. It's smart from them. I think they're going to have fantastic EVs when these come out. I have driven it. I have driven a CR-V with the bones of these EVs, and it feels like an EV with pretty minimal body roll. Like, it handled quite well, felt really wide, but it felt like a fairly well done EV. I only drove it for like 5 minutes in Japan, but it was an amazing experience to be able to drive it so early, probably about a year and a half before it's available. And so I'm going to end it there. Honda, I like how realistic they're being. They're not doubling down on this EV dream as soon as possible. Now with the EV tax credit gone, everyone else also putting the brakes on EV crossover, three-row crossovers specifically. It makes sense. All right. I'll see you guys in the comments. I'm sure you have some really insightful things and ideas to share about Honda's scrapping of EVs. Okay. I don't know if this is going to be the first and the last, or just the first of many of EV cancellations from Honda. Time will tell. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more news updates here on the channel. Have a great day. Peace.